Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this next installment of my Gilded Age Women of Southampton. I will be talking about Consuelo Vanderbilt, the pawn. There she is with her two sons. So Consuelo Vanderbilt is a willowy beauty of 17 when the 26-year-old Frenchman and future aviation pioneer Jacques Balsan first sees her and falls in love. It would be nearly another 26 years before the two will finally marry in 1921, and Consuelo will find happiness with Jacques in France and later in Southampton. In the intervening years, both would marry others. Balsan would be celebrated for his record-breaking feats of aviation, while Consuelo would submit to the life imposed on her as the spectacularly rich and aristocratically groomed daughter of Alva Vanderbilt, a woman with obsessive social ambitions. While Balsan was being lionized as a hero, Consuelo was enduring a loveless marriage and lonely exile as the wife of a foppish English peer of the realm. Consuelo's mother, Alva, had married William Kissam Vanderbilt, the richest of the very rich Vanderbilts, in 1875. From the day of Consuelo's birth, Alva harbors the highest social goals for her only daughter. But as long as Consuelo remains a young girl, she's allowed some freedom to enjoy her very privileged surroundings. Of the three family mansions, Consuelo's favorite is the one called Idle Hour in Oakdale on Long Island, designed by William Morris Hunt. The original 100-room Queen Anne-style wooden structure, completed in 1882, would burn to the ground in 1899 to be replaced by a more formal brick mansion. I don't have that, do I? But okay. But it's the original Idle Hour that Consuelo loves. She refers to it as her father's house, the place where she spends the early summers and autumn months of her childhood, crabbing, fishing in the Connecticut River, and learning to sail. She loves the time spent there with her warm-hearted father, who isn't often available. But even the normally unbending Alva loosens up at Idle Hour. She allows Consuelo and her siblings to take over an old bowling alley on the property as a playhouse, but insists the children do all the housework themselves, even the cooking. Later, Consuelo's summers are spent at Newport in the colossal Marble House, a grandiose mansion also designed by William Morris Hunt and completed in 1892. To Consuelo, Marble House seems like a prison, with its high surrounding wall and heavy drapes to keep out the sun and the sound of the surf. Still, she manages to escape the splendor occasionally to have some fun at a nearby farm. There is little escape for Consuelo from Alva's dominance when the time comes to return to the Petit Chateau, the family's Fifth Avenue palace, completed in 1882. William Morris Hunt pulled out all the stops on this extravagant showplace designed to show allow Alva to showcase her extreme wealth and high-end francophilia. On March 26, 1883, Alva had hosted a masked ball for 1,000 guests to officially open her Fifth Avenue castle and to confirm her triumph in entering the highest ranks of New York society. Like many of her guests, Alva is photographed in costume beforehand in the studio of photographer Jose Maria Mora. He's known for his profusion of backdrops and props, including stuffed doves for Alva. The party is said to have cost her indulgent husband $3 million. William Vanderbilt finds another beneficiary for his indulgences early in the 1890s, when the newspapers report that he is in a scandalous liaison with another woman. At about the same time, Alva is observed flirting with Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, usually called OHP. He has scandalized his family by abandoning his first wife on their honeymoon to travel with a French dancer. Bad enough she was a dancer, but French? In 1894, Alva and William Vanderbilt separate, with unpleasant consequences for Consuelo. Alva, having satisfied her social ambitions as a Vanderbilt, is able now to turn her laser focus on marrying Consuelo into the highest European society. Consuelo's course of instruction, supervised by her mother, has always bordered on cruelty. Two governesses, one German, one French, have her reading both languages by the age of 8. History, literature, mathematics, Latin, and science are taught in special small-scale classes for girls. Music lessons and an hour of exercise in Central Park fill out the day. Deportment is emphasized all day long. Perhaps most harsh, Alva orders creation of a steel brace to run from Consuelo's forehead to her waist to ensure correct posture. And indeed, Consuelo is often praised for her regal carriage. In her teens, Consuelo is recognized as a great beauty. Now that Consuelo has been molded into the perfect wife for a noble husband, Alva takes her to Europe and introduces her to many titled young men. Consuelo is, of course, besieged by suitors, but Alva finds the man she considers the perfect choice for a son-in-law in, ready, Charles, Richard, John, Spencer, Churchill, 9th Duke of Marlborough. Much has been written about this ill-starred match, but there are no kind words in any account for the Duke, who has been described as, quote, surly, critical, suspicious, and without intellectual qualities. To say that Consuelo does not share her mother's enthusiasm would be a gross understatement. Under no circumstances would the intelligent and sensitive Consuelo ever have been impressed by the dandyish Duke, but in fact she is in love with another man. And Winthrop Rutherford, a young man with an impeccable pedigree and considered the handsomest bachelor in New York society, is in love with her. He and Consuelo manage to find time with each other despite Alva's fixation on a European crown for her daughter. And during a bicycle excursion on Riverside Drive, Winthrop proposes and Consuelo accepts. That is their last meeting. After learning of the proposal, Alva watches Consuelo like a hawk, intercepts her mail, and refuses to allow Rutherford into the house. She sweeps Consuelo off to Europe again, and when Rutherford follows, Consuelo is forbidden to see him. In her desperation, Alva tells Consuelo there is madness in the Rutherford family and that he can't have children. Alva invites the Duke of Marlborough to visit Marble House in Newport, expecting him to propose to Consuelo. The surly Duke makes Alva wait, but finally, after a few days, he proposes to Consuelo in the gloomy Gothic room at Marble House, and Consuelo's fate is sealed. The wedding, set for November 6, 1895, precipitates weeks of excited anticipation for nearly everyone but the heartbroken bride-to-be. When the day arrives, 300 policemen line the street in front of St. Thomas's Church, where thousands of spectators have gathered outside. Inside, the cream of New York society, minus most of the Vanderbilts, watches the weeping bride approach the altar like a lamb to the slaughter. The Duke, who has set a high price on himself and his title, has arrived late for the ceremony after last-minute negotiations to squeeze more from the Vanderbilt fortune. The Duke needs all the money he can get. Blenheim Palace, his monumental 300-year-old residence in Oxfordshire, is in terrible shape, ready to devour Consuelo's dowry and restoration expenses. Blenheim is the one thing the Duke appears to really care about, and he's determined to restore it to its former glory. Many recognize the wedding for what it is, an especially prominent example of dollars for dukes, a craze among rich Americans for forging marital ties with titled but impecunious peers of the realm. Consuelo is just one of 9 American girls who make such marriages in 1895. In fact, such transactions occur with such frequency in the Gilded Age that the New York Times periodically prints a list of the sums changing hands. The Duke is said to have collected $2.5 million, much more today, delivered in valuable railroad stock. Just months before their daughter's wedding, in 1895, Alva and William Vanderbilt are officially divorced, and a year later, Alva becomes Mrs. O.H.P. Belmont. It's a scandal, but the indomitable Alva survives socially, while Consuelo makes the difficult adjustment to life at Blenheim, far from home, in a house full of haughty servants, with a husband she does not love and who does not love her. Nevertheless, by all accounts, Consuelo acquits herself well as the Duchess of Marlborough. With no alternatives, Consuelo masters the difficulties of managing a household with scores of servants, dinners for royalty, elaborate hunting parties, and balls. She overcomes much initial suspicion and becomes a popular figure in England. In 1902, she's one of 4 duchesses chosen to bear the canopy of Queen Alexandra at the coronation of Edward VII. But it's only a matter of time before Consuelo and the Duke have a marriage in name only. He has his clubs, his sports, and his obsessive focus on the restoration of Blenheim to occupy him. Travel is Consuelo's escape. Paris, her favorite destination, and there she's often able to enjoy the company of her exuberant father. Life at Blenheim also has its consolations. Consuelo bears two treasured sons and forges a deep friendship with the young Winston Churchill, her husband's cousin, who would, in fact, have succeeded her husband as the next Duke had she failed to produce a son. At the time, Winston, as she later described him, was, quote, the life and soul of the young and brilliant circle that gathered round him at Blenheim. Whether it was his American blood or his boyish enthusiasm and spontaneity, qualities sadly lacking in my husband, I delighted in his companionship. Churchill commiserates with Consuelo's marital unhappiness, and as Consuelo and the Duke go further and further apart, Churchill is her ally in negotiating an official separation in 1906. The separation is made easier, no doubt, thanks to the Duke's romance with Gladys Deacon, a celebrated beauty with a sordid background. Her father murdered her mother. Consuelo is only too happy to move into the charming 15th century Tudor mansion house, Crowhurst. Located not far from London, Crowhurst becomes the scene of many happy gatherings with friends who arrive from the city for weekend house parties. In her newfound freedom, she's also able to take activist stands on issues important to her. She lends her support to causes relating to child welfare and women's higher education, and comes out strongly for women's suffrage. It's a busy and happy time, though its carefree nature ends with the advent of World War I. Moving in the same circles as the dashing Jacques Balsan over the years, Consuelo has often been in the presence of the man who first fell in love with her when she was the unattainable pawn of her mother's marital maneuvers. In Balsan, the flame is reignited, and Consuelo is smitten. In 1921, when the Duke marries Gladys, there is finally a divorce. And that same year, 27 years after that first encounter, Consuelo and Jacques Balsan are married. Finally, a marriage of love. To make the break with her first marriage absolute, in 1927, Consuelo goes before an English tribunal of Catholic priests to ask for an annulment. According to canon law, being married against one's will is the only valid claim for annulment, and it falls on Alba to offer testimony in her daughter's support. Without any apparent embarrassment, Alba states, quote, I forced my daughter to marry the Duke. I have always had absolute power over my daughter. When I issued an order, nobody discussed it. I therefore did not beg, but I ordered her to marry the Duke, close quotes. The Balsans build a villa on the French Riviera, but when the Nazis invade France, they're forced to make a very daring escape through Spain to Portugal and eventually to the United States, where they spend the rest of their lives. In 1954, they begin summering in Southampton, in the shingled cottage on Oxpaster Road, variously known as Gardenside and Caramia. After Jacques Balsan's death 2 years later, Consuelo continues to divide her time between New York and Southampton, becoming a familiar figure around town. The days of her notoriety are behind her, but she has apparently not lost her aristocratic tastes. Having once admired a Louis XVI room and its boiserie, in a French chateau. She has the entire room transported to Gardenside, where it remains until her death in 1964 at the age of 88. And there I conclude her story. For the next installment in the Gilded Age series, I'll be talking about the Kreider triplets on September 24th. After their debut in 1900, the sisters are celebrities as well as curiosities in New York society. Uh, their marriage brings them wealth and glamorous lives, but for one of them, it also brings tragedy and scandal. So I hope you'll join me for that. And in the meanwhile, you can find all of our activities on our website.
That was great, Mary. Yeah, I hope everybody had a great time. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to submit those. You can send your questions either through the chat function or the Q&A button, both of which can be found usually on the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. If you're on an iPad or something like that, I'm not exactly sure where it would be, but probably near where all the sort of general mute buttons and things like that are. But if you do have any questions, now would be a great time. As Mary said, I want to thank everybody for coming to this program. Make sure to go to our website, southamptonhistory.org, sign up for all of our future programs, like her next lecture on the Kreider triplets, which is a very interesting story. So let's see, we have a few questions. What happened to Consuelo's sons?
I'm not sure about their future, but one of them, the older one, became the next Duke of Marlborough.
That's good. Let's see another one. Thank you. This was very interesting. Did Alva throw her support to the U.S. women's suffrage movement? If so, was it rather hypocritical of her to force her daughter to marry against her will?
She did. She was in favor of women's suffrage and became active. And sounds to me like she may have had. She may have mellowed with age. I think she. I sensed that because she came forward for Consuelo at the annulment hearing, that she had some regrets.
Yeah, and I feel like back then, many times with social change, people didn't always understand the full nuance of things. So you might be trying to work in one good way and then still make a lot of mistakes.
Exactly.
A very common human trait. Let's see, we have some others in the chat. Let's see. Oh, someone was asking if they had any kids, which they did, as that was the first question.
Right. I'll have to look into what became of the younger son.
Gotcha. Let's see. I believe that is all we have as far as questions. So with that, we will let everybody go for the day. I want to thank you again, Mary, for giving us this talk. So it was fantastic. Again, this will be on our YouTube page where we have all the other previous High Style and the Gilded Age talks, as well as a few others. So please feel free to go there, check them out, share them with your friends. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would be a great help as well. But again, thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.